A novice witch training far from home? I think I've read this before. Hi everyone, I'm Jacob, I'm the Cowhat Librarian, and I'm here to talk about Tidesong by the very talented Wendy Xu. It's a brand new graphic novel that crossed my radar the other day, and I quite enjoyed it. The TLDR here is if you like things like Kiki's Delivery Service and wanted that with a splash of the 5 Worlds by Mark Siegel, also an incredible graphic novel series, this is what you'd end up with. Sophie is a water witch. Well, a would-be water witch. Her family has a history of working water magic, and their magic is closely tied to the sea dragons that live in their world. And to prepare her to enter a magical academy, she travels to live with her aunt and her cousin, where they will help train her in her water magic prior to applying to a magical academy. But Sophie has a few flaws. She's not nearly as talented as she thinks she is, which leads her to getting into trouble. And she takes things far more seriously and negatively than people intended. And the result of those two flaws acting in concert puts her in a spiral of depression and an attempt at overcompensation by trying the next, more dangerous magic spell. So Sophie settles into her new life with her aunt and her cousin. Her aunt is very, very critical of Sophie and her efforts, and her cousin is somewhat more encouraging, and she tries to train Sophie to start with the basics, tying a knot in the wind, and so on. But Sophie keeps pushing for the next big thing, the next harder thing, and to help her out, her cousin Sage gives Sophie a notebook that she used to help her learn all the basics when she was younger. And Sophie thinks this is great. But her flaw comes out again, and she sneaks out at night to try a major spell to calm a storm. And it fails miserably. She ends up drowning in the water and is saved by a young sea dragon named Tyr. And when he comes on land and rescues her, he can't change back into a dragon any longer. And he has no idea how far he's traveled from home. And the local sea dragons don't know who he belongs to. This is a major, major problem because he, as it turns out, is a member of a royal family. He's a prince. And the repercussions of not contacting his family and returning him as soon as possible could be major. The silver lining for Sophie, though, is that for whatever weird reason, her magic works better when Tyr is around. She's able to exhibit much finer control and cast stronger magics when he's there. Their powers work synergistically. She's jealous of him because it seems to come easily to him, because her aunt seems to like Tyr and his efforts better than her own. But she's not so sure she wants to give up that extra power she has when he's around. It's compelling. It's wonderful. Sophie's actions are very, very believable, especially when you look at them through the lens of the character she's established as earlier in the book. Her desire to be a stronger water witch, her desire to prove her aunt wrong, and all these things certainly play into her wanting to keep Tyr around just so she could be better at magic. It's wonderful. If you liked Kiki's Delivery Service, or The Little Mermaid, or Ava Evergreen's Semi-Magical Witch, or Studio Ghibli in general, and as I mentioned before, the feeling of this graphic novel is very, very similar to the 5 Worlds series by Mark Siegel. And if you enjoyed that series and you'd like something that feels the same, even if the specifics are fairly different, I'd highly recommend Tidesong. Now, as for the illustration style, Wendy Xu did the illustrations herself, and she's definitely got a lot of talent. It's a muted color palette, and the character designs are very Studio Ghibli-esque, and even the action sequences are sort of understated. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think it's very, very easy to parse visually, and I think the art style will have a lot of fans. Now, with all that said, there are spoilers ahead because I do have to talk about the deal breaker. The main deal breaker for me is how the story wraps up for Sophie. As it turns out, she wasn't wholly responsible for what happened to Tyr, and she gives a speech that convinces the King Sea Dragon that Tyr's just fine and he should appreciate him more. And she's basically let off the hook for everything she's done. And I understand that Wendy Xu didn't want to go too hard on Sophie and didn't want to make her out to be a villain or anything else, but it felt a lot like just everything was let off the hook for her, that she didn't ultimately have to take responsibility for her actions. Now, I know it tied in with her learning to quiet that nagging voice that put her down and blamed her for more than it should have. But at the same time, it felt like she got off very, very easy in the end. And I have a very hard time believing that this powerful King Sea Dragon with immense magic would listen to a bare novice water witch who caused some of this problem in the first place. It rang a little hollow to me personally. But still, I highly recommend it. I highly recommend that you go to your local public library and borrow it. I don't think you'll be disappointed. And while I'm on that topic, if you use your public library and you value your public library, I'd just like to suggest that you take 2 minutes out of your day and tell the powers that be in your community. Take 2 minutes and call or email your city council members or your mayor and let those people know that you value your public library. It might not always be apparent, but an awful lot of our libraries are struggling for sustainable funding, and every person's voice saying that they appreciate the library and value its services makes it just that little bit easier for us to obtain the funding we need to keep providing you all the services we do. So with that, if you like this video, please like, please subscribe by all means, and please check back to see what else I have to talk about from the Cowhat Library. Oh, and if Tidesong sounds good to you, also check out my video about Eva Evergreen's Semi-Magical Witch. I think you'll enjoy that one too. Thank you. Bye now.